And tonight, as the government dishes out cash like never before, Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty has a simple message: cap the spending. Good evening. I'm Shannon Bremen tonight for Greta. Governor Pawlenty wants strict spending limits in his house in his home state of Minnesota, and he wants an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would require a balanced budget. What are the details? Well, Governor Tim Pawlenty joins us now with the very latest on those details. Governor, welcome.
Well, good to be with you, Shannon. Of course, our best wishes go out to Rush as he's facing a medical challenge, so we hope he turns out to be just fine.
We sure do, too, and we'll keep folks updated. Let me ask you about this idea of a balanced budget. It's been tried before on a federal level as a U.S. constitutional amendment. Do you believe it's a possibility, and how will you push for that?
Well, it's going to be an uphill battle, Shannon, but it starts with this: saying the truth and the reality. And the truth and the reality is the country's in trouble. Many states are in financial trouble. We've got a federal government that's running a Ponzi scheme. They take in about $2.2 trillion a year. They've got $12 trillion in debt, and they've got $65 trillion of unfunded liability. This is no longer about being Republican or Democrat. It's a matter of basic math. So that's an extraordinary crisis situation, and it's going to take extraordinary measures. So under normal circumstances, I would say this isn't going to happen. But as the country continues to wake up to the crisis we face, they're going to be more open to solutions like this.
And we've heard many of your fellow governors expressing the same kinds of concerns, especially in the context of the health care situation reform that they say are going to cost their states big time. Do you think that your fellow governors will join in with you in pushing for something at the federal level?
Well, I certainly know many Republican governors will. And let's face it, this current administration and current Congress has made it exponentially worse. But these trend lines have been in place for a long time. So we need to send people to Washington who do what they say they're going to do. If they say they're going to balance budgets and hold down spending and not raise taxes or cut taxes, then we need to make sure they do that. And that's not what's been happening in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so to get this passed, of course, would take 2/3 of both the House and the Senate, and then 3/4 of the states to ratify. But we know Washington seems to like taxing. It seems to like the debt. The debt ceiling's just been raised once again. Do you think even if the general public, the American public, is convinced about this idea, they'll be able to convince their representatives in D.C.?
Well, it's going to take a while, Shannon. I'm not Pollyannish about how difficult this is, but I think as this crisis continues to set in, and the country is in deep, deep trouble, as I mentioned, financially, people are going to hold office holders and candidates to account and look for a better way to do business, and this is a better way to do it. So it's going to be a long road. It's going to be an uphill battle, but I think it's a common sense idea. You've got to live within your means. You've got to balance the budget. And I think the American public will support this, but it's going to take a bit of time and a bit of effort.
And so a lot of folks who say that we've got to level off our national debt say we're looking at either more taxes or cutting certain programs that benefit certain groups and certain constituencies. Which side do you think is going to give? Because nobody really seems to want to budge on either one of those. Neither is popular with everyone.
Well, it's very similar to the debate in Minnesota, and I can tell you the answer is not to have our Democratic friends try to raise taxes and have profligate spending. That isn't going to stimulate the economy. That's not going to grow jobs. That's not going to lead to more business startups and business growth. This is not a matter of the country being undertaxed or Minnesota being undertaxed. This is a matter of most of our governmental systems spending too much, too fast, growing faster than the private economy, growing faster than any reasonable ability to pay for it. It is reckless. It's irresponsible. It can't last, and this is going to come crashing down. We're going to have the federal government spending equivalent to the subprime mortgage crisis in the not-too-distant future.
Well, let me ask you, if folks did come together at the national level to make this happen and really put the brakes on spending, cutting back programs, those kinds of things, the American public, most of us have gotten used to a very comfortable lifestyle and to having things when we want them and how we want them. Do you think that we're ready to sacrifice and hunker down in the way that it would require if we're going to put the brakes on?
Well, we're more ready now as citizens than we were a year or two or three ago. You see that in the polls. You see that in discussions. You see that in the Tea Party movement. More and more Americans are not only waking up, but they're fed up, and they're saying, enough, stop it. So in Minnesota, we need to do things like prioritize military spending, veterans programs, and some others. But basically, everything else is going to have to be slowed down or cut to make this work. That's a hard message, but these are tough decisions that are going to need to be made in tough times. And that's what leadership is going to have to be about. And unfortunately, we're not getting that from the current administration or this current Congress.
Well, and you mentioned those tough decisions. You made some of those yourself in Minnesota over the summer, cutting back on some spending issues. There was a bit of a backlash. How do you answer your critics?
Well, in fact, I got sued over it. And in fact, we're in court over it. But, you know, I'm not going to make any apologies for trying to stand down and defeat proposals, particularly in a high-tax, high-spending state like Minnesota. I'm not going to apologize for trying to defeat proposals to raise taxes and engage in irresponsible spending. I don't think that's the right course for Minnesota. I don't think that's the right course for our country.
And we know there on the state level that you are trying to get through a balanced budget amendment on the state level that would require spending to be tied very specifically to the revenues that have been brought in within a specific period. Do you think you're going to get traction there and make it happen on the state level?
Well, we may. Again, my friends on the other side of the aisle don't agree with that proposal. Most states, 49, already have a balanced budget requirement like that I'm proposing for the federal government. It works. It's difficult decision-making, but in the end, it works. And now, in addition to that, I'm saying, by the way, we also can't project revenues coming in the future that are greater than what we took in currently. Instead of having these hopeful or wishful or optimistic scenarios for revenue, you can only base future spending decisions on what you're bringing in currently. I think that's a much more conservative approach to budgeting. That's what we're proposing for Minnesota. And I think my legislature may consider this, particularly when they get a look at what's coming with our budget.
All right, Governor Pawlenty, thank you so much for your time and Happy New Year.
Hey, same to you, Shannon. Thanks for having the show.